My name is Michael Coldewey. I'm a professor at the film school nearby, and I'm coming from the animation industry and business, directed animated feature films, produced series and feature films, and did a lot of visual effects. I think 12 Marvel movies, for example. So I know a little bit about the industry. That's maybe why the Film Fest asked me to do this panel. But I feel very honored to be here, I have to say. And but I don't want to talk because I'm not the one you want to know. And I'm honored to introduce you to the actress Lily Gladstone.
Thank you.
And yeah, this is unbelievable that you are here. You just finished a movie with Martin Scorsese, right? Wow, this is really something. We will talk later, maybe. And then we have also John Way here. He is one of the actors of the movie QUANTUM Cowboy. And we have someone for music, right? Howe Gelb. Gelb, you say Gelb? So he did the music. And do you have a concert here in Munich as well? This is it. The guitar is there. Fantastic, in the corner. Fantastic. And of course, we have the filmmaker, the producer, writer, animator, and director, Geoff Marslett here. The reason why we are here, maybe, or one of the most reasons. But I don't want to talk too much. I would like to give you the word. So please say something about your adventure you just went through with the animation.
Yeah, well, thank you all for coming. This is an animated film, and I think even within animated films are already a little bit different, a little bit strange, a little bit out there in the world of films. And I think in the world of animated films, we're even a little bit further out there. It's a mix of styles, it's a mix of formats, it's a mix of frame rates, it's a mix of 16 millimeter and digital. That really was an adventure over several years to make. And as I know, working on Marvel movie, for example, animation is expensive and time consuming. And we also made this on, obviously a low budget and a very personal project. So it's both challenging and rewarding. It allowed us to make something that I don't think anyone's really seen before, for good or bad. At least it's something you haven't seen before. But the trade-off, the compromise, it takes it out of you in just sheer effort.
So how long was your production time for QUANTUM Cowboy?
We began production in October of 2019. So what does that end up being? 2.5 years? Is that right? Does that sound right? Which is pretty fast, all things considered. The shooting really only took about a month that we got through principal photography. We did have to pick up some footage in New York and some more footage out in the West at different times during 2020. But essentially we shot very quickly, and then COVID, of course, happened. And it meant the way we did the animation had to change, that I couldn't bring all the animators into one room and work with them. But I basically became the compositor, became the finished animator, became the cleanup artist, and had to work with people remotely. And they'd send pieces to us for about 2.5 of those years was just the straight animating. And we finished hours before I got on the plane to go to Annecy, 4 hours before I got on the plane to go to Annecy.
This is always the case, of course. But, well, you might, if you haven't seen it, you might think of, wait a minute, shooting? We are talking about an animation film, animated feature. So your special technique is rotoscoping as well in this movie? Yeah,
there's a large amount of the animation is rotoscoping, even the stuff that isn't rotoscoped. So, for example, the stop motion, we did still shoot human reference, actor references. So any performance you see in the movie, the actors did actually perform opposite each other. It wasn't done in a sound booth or voiceover. They really acted all of these scenes. And for a lot of those was digital rotoscoping. For anyone who doesn't know, it's tracing, essentially, but you take the images and you draw over them. We used 4 different types of hand digital rotoscoping. We also did paper cutouts for some of the animations. So, again, we filmed the real characters, printed them on paper, cut the paper out frame by frame, and then built like a dollhouse, like a miniature, and then rephotographed them in those spaces. We also used some stuff with EB Synth in a few of the scenes, which is a new program that would allow me to do a painting for, say, frame 1, and another painting for frame 9 or 10, and then the computer tries to figure out by looking at the video footage how to interpolate, and then you go and clean up, and it gives you this kind of weird, dreamy smear looks. And then some of it was just drawn. There were also scenes that actually we shot the people, ended up just being hand-drawn, not quite rotoscope, but more like old 70s semi-realistic animation styles. So we mixed it up a little.
But I think this is what I would say, of course, the real filmmaking, because just, shooting someone on stage, everyone kind of can do that, but then that is just the beginning for all the work you did, right?
This is music to my ears. I do both live action and animated films, and so often you go to a film festival and someone sees your animated film and they say, this is great. One day you're going to make like a real movie instead of that little animated one. And I just look at them like, I don't think you know that making an animated film is like 10 times harder than making the real movie. There is sometimes a dismissal of animation as just being for kids or hyper-violent video games and kind of nothing in between, which it shouldn't be. I mean, the word animation shouldn't be a content genre. It's not. It's a way of making a film. And I agree with you. It's a way of making a film that lets you micromanage the universe. So one of the reasons we used animation is you put in the extra work, but the big advantage you get is that every single frame in the movie, every single background object, everything that happens didn't just happen because production design put it there. You had to choose it, make it, create it. So you have to do the work, but it also means you chose it. And it's if you're willing to sacrifice your time to have that kind of control, it's an amazing art form.
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, I believe that animated feature films are the real movies because the movement is happening on screen and didn't happen before. Yeah. Of course, rotoscoping is a little different, but there is no movement before. It is with the screening, the movement is coming, and that's for me the real film. But I know, yeah, it's. But you mentioned one point that is also for me very important. Animation, especially in Germany, they always put this in the kids' corner. Yeah, it's for kids. Animation is for kids, and that is absolutely not true. And thanks to Netflix and other streamers, now more and more content like Love, Death, and Robots and things are coming.
Exactly. Also
for older ones. And I directed Heavy Metal, for example, in the movie. Absolutely not for kids. Yeah.
But also amazing. I mean, and even in its time, unusual. That it wasn't what everyone else was doing. It's pretty incredible to again say this doesn't have to be Mickey Mouse. That doesn't have. And those things are great, but everything's not the Minions. There's other stuff happening.
So I'm absolutely excited that you made it. I mean, how can you make a full-length feature film not for kids or not only for kids?
It's very hard, and the odds are always against you doing it. So there's a sheer amount of work, but it also took support from a cast that was willing to take a chance on this film because we didn't have necessarily the kind of budget to just say, I don't care, Lily, if you don't like it, but here's a large pile of money, so just do it. Lily had to take time out of a very busy, great career that she has to come and do this. The same for Howe, writing music. I mean, it took a lot of time co-writing this original story with me, bringing in John, bringing in Kiowa, Gary Farmer, all these people that have very busy dance cards. David Arquette, we had to call and say, here, this is all we can pay, this is the time, will you trust us with it? And then even that modest resource, I have to give, even above that, a huge thank you to Bill Way, my producer, co-producer on this, who's actually out here, and Fit Via V, that to find an independent production company that says, I know this film is weird and we may have a steep hill to climb when we try to distribute this thing, and still get behind the film and still let me make the decisions to make this film be so strange and different and not say, okay, you can have a little bit of that, but what if we made it more for kids? What if I never got that kind of pressure. So I agree with you. It's kind of a miracle that this gets made, and I think I just got very lucky to find a team across the board who had shared my vision and was so supportive of me.
So you wrote the story, right? When I remember right? Or
no,
who did?
Collaboration.
Collaboration?
Yeah.
So the first idea came from you, and then you...
I put out... I've never done this before. I laid out a few of the outline scenes and a rough premise of two guys, one being from Denmark, sojourning through their odyssey. And then Geoff was able to make sense of it and then build from that something that he could actually film, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just, but things like the guy who gets out of prison with the stripes on the zebra, I just wanted to see that. So I threw that in there. And then the arc was really, it's a legendary arc in Aravaca Mountains in south of Tucson, where there's been, they can't explain exactly what happens there, and they're not telling anybody where it is, but it exists. And you can look through it by reports, and the weather will be different than when you're looking around it. And then a couple of the hikers that went up there the second time to find it, as they were climbing up the hill, all of a sudden they found themselves on the other side of the canyon, climbing up and completely disoriented. And so that had to be a piece of it. And then Geoff took things like that and just used his knowledge of quantum physics and his great creative ability to write dialogue for so many characters, which I didn't know. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you write. And then the actors, of course, make those dialogues become, alive, a real presence, and they become those separate entities. So I might have answered some of your stuff.
Yeah. In animation, sometimes it's different with the script, how important a script is, right? It's more the storyboard, right? So the final kind of story or script comes through the storyboard?
Yeah, all the way through it, but even at the script stage, because I knew we were going to use multiple representations, each of these different animation styles really representing a different universe, but a universe that's created by the different memories of each of the characters. That had to be kept straight from very early on. So even before the storyboard, the script itself also came with a large flow chart with arrows, so you'd know which Frank was existing in which scenes, and things to keep it straight. There wasn't quite the freedom to say, well, what if I just change this scene around a little bit? Like, well, this is a pretty complicated puzzle, so you have to think that through. And then from there, of course, you need, I always create an animatic when I'm working, so just simple playbacks. For those who don't know, an animatic can be very detailed, but it also can be essentially storyboards just laid into an editor, so they play back around roughly the time a scene would take with dialogue, and then really built elaborate storyboards off of that. And we shot so much on a green screen that if your storyboards aren't really accurate, it's very hard to get the shots that you need technically to do what you have to do at the next stage. So yeah, you have some freedom, but a lot of that freedom gets forced in there. Although, it's low budget, so sometimes you get there and then the horses are acting up and it snows 2 feet and now you have to move your shots. So we also dealt with a little bit of, okay, we'll do this on the fly.
We had storyboards?
Yeah. I know. I don't think the actors even ever saw the storyboards.
So you shot on location, but then with mobile green screen?
About 60% of the film was shot. We built like a 60-foot green screen inside a horse barn with no heat.
95% of the film was below freezing.
Yeah, It was very cold. So we shot in October in Boulder, Colorado, where the average temperature in October is 65 degrees. So we thought it's going to be great. On day one of shooting, a blizzard came in, and it sat on us for the entire month, and there was 2 feet of snow, and most days it was like 10 or 12 degrees, 10 or 12 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a negative number for all you Celsius people out there. And we had to make people look hot. Some of those scenes where, Frank and Bruno are meeting at the crossroads, I had to hand roto out feet of snow around those horses' feet, and it was quite a challenge.
Fantastic. Great. I love Boulder. I was there a long time ago, working in Boulder. Fantastic place in Colorado. Lily, I'm always confused with Lily because one of my main character in my TV series, Lily the Witch, actually Lily, is called Lily as well. How different was the shooting then for because when you shoot normally, kind of, not normally, but in live action movies, they keep your face as it is, and they keep your performance, everything like you performed on stage or on camera. Now you had to trust all the others, the artists working on your face.
Yeah, I found it was a really great opportunity to bring a little bit more of my theater background into film work. Is I always try to walk that back. The trick of film is you don't oversell things. You just allow it to live, and the camera doesn't lie. The camera picks up the truth of the moment, and that's in a lot of ways much more difficult. But in any case, before I'd started shooting, I watched some behind the scenes of Benedict Cumberbatch doing Smaug for The Hobbit, and watched his physical acting in that, his vocal acting, because I wanted to see, I knew I wasn't going to be that heavily animated, but I wanted to see how somebody who's one of the greatest actors in the world tackled that. And I just saw him playing and being big, and so I knew more or less, I knew which shots were going to be still me with an animated background, and then we're going to be completely animated. A lot of times it's, obviously if we were in front of the green screen, it was going to be animated, or if we were wearing costumes a certain way, and our makeup artist, for example, wasn't worried about doing a certain thing. It's like, okay, that means I'm going to be animated. It was kind of looking at it almost like doing mask work in a theatrical setting where the mask wears you and you inhabit that. I had no idea what the mask was going to look like, but I knew that whatever gestures I was making, my performance needed to come through the animation. So it gave me a little bit more permission to have fun, be big. It influenced my pacing a little bit in a way that I don't normally think about too much. But yeah, it was fun, and so I was really pleased with how it came out.
Well, in our type of animation, not in the manga type, in the Western type, the voice recording and the voice is pacing the animation, right? It's giving the right speed and everything.
Yeah.
And now also the facials and everything as well. So did you use the voice recording on set, or did you have to do a lot of voice recording afterwards?
The movie is 95% on-set voice recording. There's a couple scenes had some wind, just like in a live action, and so Kiowa and John did a little bit of ADR, but Lily, I don't think you did any ADR, so all of hers is on set. Howe, you didn't do any ADR, I don't think.
It's probably because I treated it like a theater, projected a little more than usual.
Yeah, I think the only places we really had to ADR is some of the stuff on horseback, just because it's windy and they're wide shots and the boom mic can't be there, so we did a little bit of ADR, but it was 95% of the film was on set.
For the ones who don't know, ADR is when you record later in the post, like synchronizing the work. And and for you, the experience as an actor, being on stage, but don't know what is going to happen maybe later, or?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to film this because I feel like more so than in other projects, the actors really had to be there for each other. We were given, not only did we have to be our characters, but before every scene, Geoff would gather the actors and he would say, okay, this is what's happening. There's going to be floating things over here. This is that. So we had to kind of agree upon what the world was going to look like. So not only were we living in our own characters, but we were kind of living inside the other actors' heads too. And I feel like that was just a really fun, freeing, and intimate process that doesn't usually happen when you have a physical set.
Yeah, you had to have a shared imaginary world that you were in, and it had to at least be close enough that you could do it together.
And so Lily said something that's just so true and so great. Is it really felt like acting in like a black box theater. You just got to create everything, and that was a really fun and liberating process. Yeah.
And you all have to ride horses, right? So you have to be used to horses.
I love working with horses in film. Like, it's sometimes it can get a little bit hairy because they're giant animals that have their own animism and their own agency and everything, and they do what they want. But horses are so present. They don't lie. They add. I just love in a shot when, you know, people are talking, you've got the horses, their heads moving. They're so interesting. They're so interesting to watch. And remarkably, I mean, I've acted with horses a lot in my career at this point. And when you're in character, the horse will always hit their mark. The horse will always be there with you. When you're not in character, when you don't have a clear objective, just like when you're on a horse, anybody who rides a horse, if you know where you're going, the horse will go there. So it's almost an incredible acting exercise to have this animal that is manifesting what's going on inside of you. And it'll tell you pretty quickly if you've got nervous energy, if you've got uncertain energy. It'll start pulling up grass. It'll start wandering this way. It'll I was a little too in character once because I ride a bit. I ride a bit, not a tremendous amount. But in the shot, and I mean, I kind of wish it was in the film, but in the shot, just Lindy being the confident, agent of these multiverses that she is, exiting the shot, I gave my horse a little, yeah, and the horse was like, oh, you know what you're doing. All right, let's go. I'm like, no, I don't, no, I don't.
Heading for the hills. Yeah.
Luckily, I didn't get thrown.
And we're all just seeing that horse in a gallop leaving, 30 feet, 40 feet, 50 feet from the rest of us. And it's like, Wranglers?
Apparently, from what they saw, it looked like I was going to get bucked off. From what I was feeling, the horse had been patient all day and was just excited to go play and go run around the pasture and didn't know I was as inexperienced as, I wasn't as experienced a rider as Lindy.
But Lily got it under control, came back, everything was good.
It was a good horse, and I think it even felt a little bit bad.
I think the little pony was the punchiest one. That was the one trying to bite John.
I'm glad the horse thing happened to you and not to me. I'd never ridden a horse until the day before we started shooting. We had a little horse training, and they're like, oh, it's okay, just act confident. If you're nervous, the horse will know. And I go, okay, I gotta make sure I can ride this horse and it doesn't buck off. Yeah.
It's so funny with this little horse.
Yeah, the little horse, because the little horse, you can sort of even see it in the shot, is kind of trying to bite you and the other horse.
Yeah, I don't know why all the big horse scenes were given to me. I have to manage 2 horses at once, and I'm like, oh, I don't know horses. But that little horse, just kept wanting to bite the big one, and then the big one would kind of boom back, and I go, whoa, guys, stop. Let's not do this.
I wish I could remember his name.
Aladdin. The little one was
yeah.
named Aladdin, yeah. Aladdin would bite Spot. That's what we're
I'm interested also in the music in terms of how do you get influenced with your ideas or storyboarding, writing, and then even shooting, influenced by music, or comes it later?
Well, in this case, having, co-writing the story with the musician who's writing the music meant it was always part of the story. So the story was very much written with live music performances in it. The ideas and the songs were always ideas in there, and I trusted Howe implicitly on creating those musical elements. So he's maybe the better answer for that.
Also, though, we're going to have some fun with there's going to be 5 different sets of different band formations, and get some of my friends on the band. But because of the way COVID took a turn, then we. Oh. Yeah, we couldn't get him in, but it could have been fun having M. Ward in there in the band playing a banjo, and Jason Lytle from Granddaddy, etc.
Look for him in the sequels.
John Doe.
Yeah. I mean, in John Doe,
Nico Case.
Yeah, John and Nico. And it was a requirement basically. If you were going to be a musician in this, you were also an actor because you were part of the world. I mean, even Brian and Gabe. Though their song they're not playing it live, they show up later as the band in the desert. So I think pretty much every musician that played the music also was pretty much.
We just had to determine how far out we wanted the music to get, because when there's the scene with the saloon of John's, I have a feeling that's what the West really sounded like. When you see that today, there's
the dissonance scene for those.
Yeah. When everybody's playing broken or detuned instruments, that's how it was. And that extreme heat in Arizona, and with no recordings to even go by to agree There's going to be originally also in this, that's on the cutting room, not even the cutting room floor, but it's off
The idea cutting room floor.
got erased, where there'd be a fight. There was almost there with the fight in Saloon of John's, where two guys couldn't agree on how like Red River Valley went because one was playing at a different speed and the other one was, and they just got into a skirmish, et cetera, because nobody knew back then.
But the music in that way was always supposed to be part of this. Like different people have their different version of music, and what's right is different from different points of view.
One of my best friends played in punk bands, metal bands, DIY basement stuff, and she watched it with me, and that was her favorite scene because this is just like practice every day.
Like 70% of the musicians who watch this film, they're on the floor laughing straight through the Bar of John scene, and they're like, "This is the best scene in the movie." And then filmmakers watch it, and they're like, "You should probably cut that scene." It's very interesting how.
That's right.
Don't touch it; it's perfect.
And all that was not overdubbed. They played so well, those guys.
Even the stuff that Steph Barkley is actually playing the slide, with the pistol, we kept the version she played. And if you look closely, you can see while she's playing slide on that thing, it's breaking the frets off as the gun slides. But it was like, we'll just leave it as is.
Yeah.
Wow, that's funny. Everything. Good. Well, so you are when I see how long it took, I think you are already planning your next movie, right?
I mean, the hope, this thing is very fresh off the presses. We have shown it in Annecy, Paris, and Munich, and that's it for the whole world. That's the only audiences that have watched it. And, I think John and I have sat through all but one screening this film has ever had and watched it with the audience. And response has been good, but, we're at the very beginning. We hope it will find some sort of distribution, some sort of life in the world that at least allows it to break even. And I think if so, the team's very excited to jump into 2 sequels, which are rough, but have been, written and laid out. So this movie is designed to have enough answers to satisfy a viewer, but leave a lot of open-ended questions that we can reveal in 2 more sequels. And Lily and I were walking to do some interviews and grab some lunch today, and just even talking about bringing in her ideas for the character of Lily and really getting to flesh these out. So yes, if this goes well, we're very excited to jump into part 2 soon.
Fantastic. That is great. I, as being a teacher as well at the film school, I'm also very interested in how you can combine both, like teaching students on one hand, but also taking care of your film and projects.
Yeah.
I don't sleep a lot. And I don't say that
never.
because I don't like sleep. But
I haven't seen Geoff ever sleep.
a lot of late nights. I mean, it's not exaggeration, hyperbole to say essentially for 2.5 years, I'd work on this film until about 2:30 or 3 a.m., sleep for a few hours, then go to the university and teach a full day, and then work on this till 2:30 or 3 a.m. and do it over again. When we shot, even my first film, Mars, was the same way, but when we shot, I would teach all day, and then like the script supervisor / editor would just pick me up from class, and we'd drive and I'd start shooting. And that's yeah. And then we just shoot all night, and then I go back and teach, and it's its own crazy Mobius strip. But teaching gives me at least a way to pay the bills. That means I can make this kind of movie and not have to worry about making a movie that just brings in enough money to be commercial. So I think teaching has given me a freedom to make the films I really wanted to make. And I do my own life. I am who I am, and I've had the success that I have had, however minimal that may or may not be, because of teaching. That really changed my life. I have cousins that went, to the armed services and different things, because when you come from medium to low income and rural Texas, there's less opportunities that seem obvious. And my going to high school with Hungarian monks, and then my going to college and learning physics and math, and then going back to college again and learning film changed my potential trajectory. And I do also like to teach, because I think if you can give that same kind of excitement in the classroom, you can help change other people's trajectories as well to something that they want to do. So I love both sides of it, but it's exhausting to juggle. And maybe the last thing I'd say about it, though, is it's also been great. Every one of my films, I've been able to bring students onto set and give them chances to work on something larger than they normally get to, and it's nice because that's an easy thing for me to do to help give them a hand.
I think Geoff being a teacher really lends to what a wonderful director he is. Like his dedication to this and getting no sleep, teaching full-time and filming full-time, I mean, that was inspiring, and we just kind of wanted to keep up with that. And then also the way that Geoff works with you as an actor. There's this Khalil Gibran quote from The Prophet on teaching, that teachers, you lead somebody to the threshold of their own understanding. They're the ones that, that's the Gibran quote. And I feel like that really comes through with Geoff's directing as well. I felt like I had a lot of room with Lindy, but there's a lot of questions because this is a triptych, because multiverse is slightly beyond all of us. Nobody's going to fully understand it, or quantum mechanics. We think we can, but then it gets away from you. So to walk through this world with an authority that, I mean, every time you launch into a project, it terrifies you. I don't know if every artist feels that way. I certainly do. But Geoff, like when he approaches you with the direction, it felt like being with a very, very good teacher, because it's somebody who just values what you're bringing so much and helps you find your own way with it rather than telling you what your way with it should be. Like, I think all of us know and remember a fantastic teacher in our lives that made us feel that way, and suddenly this big scary thing is possible. It's tactile in your hands. You're excited about what you're doing. And not every director is like that. And my mother's a teacher. I would have been a teacher if I wasn't an actor. I've got a strong love for teachers.
So
that was a great answer. I think if it was such a benefit to have someone like Geoff as a director on especially such a ambitious and large scope project, because your ability to communicate these very complex ideas in a way that someone like me could understand is a very impressive thing. So, yeah.
I have to say, John's also humble. He did a lot of his own homework on the quantum physics stuff and everything else. He prepped that accent, but he prepped his understanding of what kind of crazy wild ride we're going on just as hard. I appreciate it.
When you are with your actors and actresses, colleagues together, and you tell them, like, my next role is in an animation project, are they looking at you like, oh, what are you doing there? Or can you promote this type of work in the live action side a little bit? Or
I mean, I think every actor should give this a try. I think, I think when we're little, and not to infantilize animation any more than it already is, but animation makes the whole world feel so magical and somehow like manageable, and you want to see yourself in that. So I'm thrilled that somewhere in my little timeline, little Lily got to be a cartoon. I was already a cartoony kid, but yeah, I mean, I haven't really experienced like any other actor friends like being skeptical about it or dismissive of it or anything. I think it's kind of the dream to get to do really cool, avant-garde, new things that are really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's cutting edge. Everyone's like, wow, you got to do something like that? Like, I just did my 3rd episode of The Blacklist, that's no shame to The Blacklist, but it's also not this very high concept, brave pioneer piece right here where you're trying to find something new, trying to tell a new story in a new way. And I think as artists, getting to be on the frontier of that unknown is always a very exciting thing. Yeah.
do you think it's easier to get famous actors for such a project, animation project, than for live action, if it is just live action?
I think no. I mean, the answer to part of it would be yes, would be if you're talking to an actor and you say, I only need you for, say, 4 days instead of 12 days, because obviously if you're doing a full-blown, if we'd made this as a live action film, there's no way we could have shot this in 5 weeks or whatever. We would have needed so much time to build sets, camera changes. This would have been multi-months of shooting something this complicated without the benefits of animation. So I think from that standpoint, yes. But maybe it's a weird answer, but I think when you ask famous actors to do something, you're not really asking a famous actor to do something. You're asking a team that exists, and the team has the best interest of the career of the famous actor in mind and the longevity of that. And I think the weirder the prospect you bring to them, the higher the risk of no, because if they do something that's a known quantity, it won't damage the future of this actor's career. And if you have a team that says, I'm damage control, I make sure that they don't make a mistake, if they're looking at something that says, well, this could be really cool, but what if it's not? That works against you. And I think the what if it's not, you hear a little bit louder when you do something weird. But the flip side of that, I think, is if you can cut through all that and you get the actors to see it, then sometimes it's exciting. So then the leaning towards no can actually lean towards yes, because they're like, well, I could do this live action film, but they've got 8 of those on my plate, or I could do this weird time travel animation. So I guess in the early side, I think it actually makes it harder. But if you can stay the course and finally get there, then it makes it easier. So sometimes the opposite of harder is still harder.
Yeah. From the German perspective, we see America, the US, always as a film industry being only in Hollywood. We see California, Hollywood, there they make the movies. But you are not in Hollywood. And there is, of course, not only Hollywood. How is it being in a country like America, where everyone is looking to the West Coast?
I mean, it's tough too, from a resource standpoint. If you're looking for financing, if you're looking for certain things, being in LA, being in New York, or being in Atlanta, maybe New Mexico is going to make your road a little bit easier. But when you're making things in the rest of this vast country, you can be more exciting. People are, as a prospect, people are not burnt out on it. They're not, the good of it being a jobby job in LA is that everybody knows what they're doing and they do an exceptional job, and there's a little bit more of a path laid out. But the cool thing about it not being a jobby job in Colorado or Arizona or Montana is that everyone's very excited about it. And that excitement can also translate into a different way of doing things, a different way of looking at it, which can translate into a film that genuinely feels regional, feels of that place, and doesn't just feel like someone from LA flew to Montana to make a movie about Montana. It feels like somebody from Montana made a film about Montana, and that just excites me more. So, and I'm not alone. I mean, I think that though the rest of the world doesn't see them, the United States actually has a pretty healthy, regional filmmaking communities throughout. That when I say that, just because of hierarchies, it sounds like, regional, like I'm saying it's not as good. I'm saying the exact opposite, really. I think that there's this amazing regional filmmaking talent in America that does make films and maybe doesn't get the attention, which they should. If someone's watching this, reading this, thinking about giving attention, give it to some of those films, because they'll open your eyes a little more.
In Germany, we have a very solid, big subsidy system, like regional subsidies and state subsidies. The movies are made here with a lot of money coming from those subsidies. How is this? Maybe I don't know if I have to ask the producer more, or
no, I think you could ask Amos. I was going to make a joke and say, we have lots of subsidies in the American, but that would just be a lie. The joke would just be that I'm saying falsehoods. Large-scale state or support of the arts is essentially non-existent in the United States. So at best, your subsidies tend to be things like, you can get 10% of your tax back if you shoot in this city and use this many local, it's a lot of regulations trying to do it, and that's not like a grant. That's like, we'll let you spend a little less if you'll at least start spending, which is better than nothing. But there's very, very little in the way of Lily has this great idea for a project. Why don't we get $50,000 state money to develop the idea? And that's crazy talk. That's that's right after I said, hey, I can run 75 miles an hour.
Right, if we're going to have any kind of grants coming from any sort of government subsidy, it's always that one person in a state office that can convince, like, the Department of Tourism to set aside part of their budget to be like, hey, films bring more tourism to our state. You know, there's nothing set up for the arts. People have to get really creative and find these other entities to beg and try to really just convince people that, no, the arts are valid.
It's something we could really learn from Europe and get better at.
The lack of subsidies in music gave way to monster genres like jazz and blues and country and rock, because they were all government allocated funds to make it, like I see up in Denmark, where there's great players in the schools up there, but they don't have that edge. Nothing has that, which becomes soul when you're existing with it. And so when you're suffering the good fight, and you have contributors kicking in to try to make something exceptional happen, you get something from it that you wouldn't see if it was a little bit too easy, if you were getting money coming in and you can rely on it. There's an edge in there and a soul in there.
It forces a creativity. It forces you to rethink every time something's impossible. Then you have to be, well, how is it not impossible? And you make a new way.
The lack of a safety net.
Yeah, you mentioned Annecy. You just went to Annecy. Annecy is in France, near the Switzerland border, and is one of the biggest international festival for animated feature films and series. Actually, my decision to go into this was in Annecy, 1987 or something, and I saw Porco Rosso from Hayao Miyazaki.
Amazing film.
Yes, and when I at that time I only thought that Disney can do animation. That's it. Maybe Don Bluth a little bit. That was my world. But then I realized, wait a minute, Hayao Miyazaki, I never heard that name, and Porco Rosso, what is that? And then I was in this premiere, and I was since then completely blown away, and said to everyone, I don't know what you do, I know what I'm doing in my life, it's only animation. So you were just in Annecy. How do you feel being there in France, where, especially in France, they have so much money and subsidies, and this TV system of financing animation compared to where you have to deal with?
I mean, frankly, it made me think we wouldn't get in the first place. So, I mean, I was surprised we were accepted and invited to play at Annecy, because animation is so technical and expensive and time-consuming that the other projects you're sort of competing for that attention with, I mean, in many cases are, an $80 million film in some of those cases there, very expensive things that have had 8 years of development and 1,500 animators working on them. So you're challenged with saying, here's this thing I essentially made in my spare bedroom. How do you compete? And then in our case in particular, with some of it still being live action. So I'd say the first reaction, I was really honored, and so you're like, okay, well, let's do that. That sounds great. Let's play it at Annecy. Because it's somewhere that I've always admired and wanted to go to Annecy and see all that. But then as the event gets closer, you get a little scared. Are people going to be sticklers for various genres, various schools of animating? And I'm sure some people were. There's probably some people that watched it and they want things to look a certain way. They want the minions, or even within the hand-drawn, they even want something to follow the rules of anime, or to follow the rules of things that we didn't necessarily do. So it was really scary. I'd say once it was like, okay, now we've got 5 days of shows each night, and audiences are going to come and like us or not. But I felt much better after the first screening, because so many animation students, so many people that actually understood the difficulty this took to make, that sometimes a traditional festival might not. They would stay after and ask, I loved the way this looked, how did you do that, and pick it apart. So that fear changed, I think, in excitement to just be somewhere with a crowd of people who not only could enjoy this movie for its story and for its existence as a piece of art, as a movie, but they also, the technical side was very exciting for our audiences, and that was, for me, an audience I'd never played a film before, and that was awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, congratulations to be in Annecy is really something. Working for such a long time on this project, are there moments where you say, what I'm doing here, should I doing something else, or give,
No more than once an hour for 3 straight years. Maybe sometimes more than once an hour. Yes, yes. I mean, you know, probably this week, probably while I've been showing it, I mean, I've been like, I'm never going to make another film. I'm done. I'm walking away. I mean, yeah, that I say that almost as much as like I'm really tired and I could use a meal, you know? So I think, yes, indie film is hard. It's a very hard place to be. And with that does come some really great things, but it's very demoralizing. You know, you make something different. Everyone isn't going to like it. You make something without a safety net. There's no guarantee of it, you know, making its money back. There's no guarantee of being able to make more of these. There's no guarantee we have that it'll even be available when people ask, how do I see this movie? And that always feels hard. But when you combine that with staying up until the middle of the night every night, when you combine that with, you know, the last several months I've just done things where, and you as an animator will know and a regular viewer will never know, but like there's little smudges in the background. There's somewhere where someone's eye looks weird. You know, with live action, you cut a scene and you're like, part of it was out, even if it's a little out of focus, you just decide to keep it or not. There's not really much you can do. But with animation, every little thing that the motion on that person's leg doesn't look so good. Well, I don't like what happened with Bruno's hand there. You have the power to fix it, so you have this weird obligation to go back and fix it. And I think during that is especially when I feel it. I'm like, why am I going to such extra efforts of doing another 12 hours of work and 7 hours of rendering and then noticing it's not quite right and jumping back in and doing this until set up. I'll sleep for 4 hours. I'll get up at 4 a.m. and I'll check it and make sure. Why am I doing that for things that most people don't even know exist? They certainly don't know you had to do them. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, so this comes to the question of the work-life balance. This is I'm mentioning this because I realize in the young generation or the students I have, work-life balance is something they absolutely know, and they want to be sure that the work balance is working. In my generation, work-life balance, I want to do the movie. I do this 24/7 if I need to. How do you see this with your students, or do you?
I mean, absolutely, and hopefully it's a healthier thing that's happening with younger generations, and hopefully the flexing of that muscle to ask for work-life balance will eventually push its way up to the top of the economic chain. I mean, you can't have films unless you allow artists a little better work-life balance. So I'm hoping. I feel like it's too late for me. That work-life balance ship sailed, you know. I'm tired and broken, and you know, like even if it was all life balance now, it's still too far along. What did I call it in German? I think a seesaw is called a wooden log balancing toy machine. I don't know, all the words here are like some combined. That machine is already so imbalanced in my life that it's never going to quite give you that. But I think it would be much better if it was. That would be a gift for people to be able to live a little bit more like that. But all we can do is maybe try to incorporate a little more of that in my life as I go forward. But as soon as you say that to yourself, you're like, okay, the next one's going to be more work-life balance. Then you have some kind of opportunity, and opportunity is the opposite of opportunity because it demands. So what's called an opportunity is suddenly an obligation to do all these other things. And I wish I could stay up here and say, no, I'm going to have that balance. But I think I'm like you in that regard. I think that way of working is already hooked into me a little bit, and it'd be hard to. I would love to see myself not doing that, but it's hard for me to really imagine that I won't continue to make the kind of decisions that make me work overly hard.
Yeah, it's always quite of sad with the family. The family suffers sometimes if you are in such a key position because, hey, we have weekend together. Now I have to fix it.
This was an interesting thing. So that was all kind of negative, but here's a big positive. You know, COVID came and FOMO. Does everybody know that term? All the kids out there, fear of missing out. You know, FOMO died. Like there was nothing to miss out on. You didn't care. You were just at home working. But then also suddenly I was teaching from home. I was working from home, and my cat, who is the cat in here, I mean, I play a character who has a camera and films things, and so some people are like, that's meta, that's you. But really, there's this character of memory who's cutting memories together and has a cat that he talks to. That's really me. I mean, that's really my cat. Strange positive that came out is suddenly I was at home working on this film all the time, and I got to spend 22 hours a day with a cat I really love, and she passed away just very recently, and I miss her dearly, but so sometimes the balance is a way to incorporate that family, the people. If I can enjoy the process of making the film enough, if working with Lily as a friend can be something that I'm like, okay, I am getting friendship time as well, maybe that's how I've figured out how to balance it, is trying to incorporate people that are important to me into the project. So I can work with John, I can work with Howe. You know, I got to write a film with one of my best friends. That's pretty cool. And so even if I'm doing that till the middle of the night and I'm flying into Tucson in the middle of COVID and we're recording music that may or may not work, I also got to see Howe in the middle of COVID and do that. So I think the work balance maybe isn't the same version other people see, but for me, if I can turn the work into my life as well, that's a version of that balancing.
So you see that COVID changed the way how you work and how you teach as well, because you have the possibility to do this remotely with video and not being there.
Yeah.
Yes, I see the industry here as well, the visual effects industry and animation industry. They all the artists now more and more, not all, but more and more are working from home.
And I think that, I mean, you know, we could go into the minutia on this on VFX, but that's happening a little bit in the United States, where more animation workers are unionizing, because so much of the film industry, because it's easy for the film industry to take advantage of actors, to take advantage of below the line workers, that we have unions, and the unions in the film industry have, compared to other industries, are very strong. But once you hit the animation world, there has traditionally not been any kind of union protection. And so, like I was saying, for me, I get to work with Howe, I get to work with Lily, but I'm above the line. I'm creating. So yeah, I'm overworking myself, but it's also my creative endeavor. So that sacrifice has this really, there is a return. There is an emotional return I get. The people I worry most about are, you know, if you are working on Minions and there's 1,500 animators working 19-hour days, and no one's ever going to even read their name in that credit roll, and they're going to be asked to come in, and they'll never even meet the director, blah, blah, whatever. I shouldn't pick on Minions. I'm just using Minions because it's what's on the billboards. Maybe working on Minions is fucking awesome. I don't know. But also, Minions is never going to hire me, so I don't know. You know, I think that those people need even more of that work-life balance protection. They need those unions. There needs to be something that says, if you're going to take my vision as Geoff, the director, and you're going to go and you're going to spend the next 9 months, 10 months, 25 months working on this every day for me, those days need to be 8-hour days. You know, I don't need to have those animators working 20 hours a day, every day, breaking their back for my vision. I almost feel like they need the protections even more than I need at the top of the letterhead.
Are you working on projects as well that are coming from the outside? So it's not your project; it's someone else's project, and you're working. Yeah,
I mean, I like to do that even more and more. You know, I took the traditional road to acting. I've been acting for people recently, not the traditional at all. I waited till I was, you know, a middle-aged man and did some funny bumpers for South by Southwest one year, and then people were like, oh, you could be in my movie. I mean, I love doing that. I actually love that a lot because it's someone else's. I just did one for a woman, Izzy Schill, that played in New York right after I got to Annecy, so I didn't get to go to the premiere of the film, but I heard it went well. But it was really nice to have someone else say, here's this script, here's this thing that I'm going to be investing my heart into and trying to make. Will you be a little part of it? And then I just try to lift up my part of it as well as I can. It's really fun to collaborate. There's an excitement to me to do someone else's script or to give someone else my script and have them do it, and I can be hands off. I just finished producing a project I'm super excited about for Skinner Myers, who is a filmmaker also living in Colorado now, but he wrote and directed, we shot all in 35 millimeter, black and white, super low budget, on the side of a mountain at 13,000 feet, you know, hauling 75-pound tripod heads, you know, the exact opposite of animation in a way. But I love that, and I can still bring my creative problem solving and my thoughts of filmmaking to collaborate with Skinner. So yeah, I'm very excited to not always have to carry that whole creative burden.
I don't know. We haven't talked before. I know, you know, if I couldn't ask if there are questions that I should not ask. So maybe artificial intelligence. I don't know if you.
I mean, as it refers to animation.
Yeah, because I don't know how much you know about künstliche Intelligenz, KI, artificial intelligence. Because in our industry, in the filmmaking or in the image creation, is now a big fear going around saying, wait a minute, because of everyone now is giving all the information through their smartphones into the system learns. And there's another species now on this planet. It's not the humans, you know, it's the internet. And that is an own species and start thinking. So you can put something like an idea in a word into the system, and the system is creating the image. I mean, this is so crazy. Huh?
It's coming, and I think, it's maybe not what I do. I kind of hope we made a film that helps break that algorithm or slow it down just a little bit. You push Quantum Cowboys in there, and it's like does not compute. So I hope we were a little piece of rock stuck in that. We're the ungovernable a little bit. So maybe I'm the one trying to push the other way, or not maybe. I think, yes, I am. But I don't want to dismiss it entirely either. I mean, I think there are things. I try to stay open-minded. I don't think my point of view is necessarily the only one. And I've seen some people do some amazing things, and there are even offshoots of that. We used a program called EB Synth, which is specifically not AI, because there's AI in animation that you can kind of create things, and it does, like all those, I mean, you all have smartphones. You've maybe taken, like, get your grandparents' photograph, and it makes it talk, and all those. There's AI that does some weird stuff that rewind 25 years ago, and it would have been people like you and I doing that by hand, and people being like, wow, how did you do that? And now, there's an app that just steals your social security number and kicks that back out for you. There's other tools like that. I liked EB Synth because it's not an AI, it's a visual based thing. I got to use that for a couple scenes. So I do like some of the technology too. I like to wander around in it, but mostly I like to see things people build the hard way, not necessarily because the end product's even all that much better, but because somebody built it the hard way.
Yeah, maybe it's we will see how it goes with, like, ABBA, for example. You are going into a concert, you watch ABBA, but they are not there. There, and
the Roy Orbison
music,
hologram.
like live is something different, but creating images, I mean, this is not live. How this does. I'm allowed to ask now a little bit about Martin Scorsese work.
No.
No? Killers of the Flower Moon is...
I can speak to the story that it's based on. It's based on a book called of the same name by David Gran, and it's shining a light on this really dark period of history. And it's we're at the centennial of when these events happened, when all of these, they say it was 20-some cases of Osage Indians who overnight became the richest people in the world per capita because of oil. Osage had been trading with the French and the Spanish for a long time, so they understood how the white man thought a little bit more than some other tribes in North America. So when they were removed from their lands to Oklahoma, they had the foresight to secure the mineral rights, the surface rights of the reservation, as well as the boundaries. And then, go figure, 10 years later, they strike oil. This brought in a lot of people to their community that befriended them and then murdered them for their head rights. Head rights are what an Osage was assigned for the rights for the money that would come from extracting oil on their leased lands. And it was an epidemic that happened all through the 1920s. The Osage call it the Reign of Terror, and nobody would help them. So because they are an incredibly organized and still here, very active tribal group, the nation approached what was the CIA at the time. They went to Washington. They appealed to Coolidge, President Coolidge, about these murders because local governments were in on it. I mean, the police in Oklahoma at the time were largely in on this. This was also during the time when the Tulsa race massacre, or the Tulsa massacre happened, the race riot in Tulsa. Black Wall Street, the bombing of Greenwood happened. It was all in the same era. So this is a history that's really important to examine at the centennial of it. It's an examination, the book itself, and then I think, I can't speak for Marty and I can't speak to the film until I see it. But really it's looking at this nature of greed and what it's done and where we're going. And then also what I've seen being there is, and being American Indian myself, I'm mixed, clearly, but I grew up on my reservation in Blackfeet and Nez Perce, and there's this image that, oddly, Europeans have a better sense of American Indians than Americans often do. You ask most Americans, they think we're gone. They think we don't exist anymore. And, very much that, I mean, we've survived our own version of the apocalypse so much. And this story, I think, is, it's important to tell it now. If you haven't read the book, I would suggest doing so. Yeah, it's
Okay. Thank you very much. Though we are looking forward to this movie, but now is of course Quantum Cowboy is.
I'm looking forward to that one too. We all are.
And it was such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much, traveling over the entire planet to come to this place. We heated up a little bit outside, so you feel like at home, right? And you see how air conditioning in Germany is working. You know? Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having
us. And thank you as well.